Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Crazy day today. Really glad you're here. First, the results are still coming in Georgia, but we are going to assume that both the Democrats are going to pull it out in Georgia. We're going to talk a lot more about this tomorrow. It's like surreal. Georgia is a blue state now. It feels bad to lose. The Senate's now going to be 50-50. Georgia's blue. What in the world? I'm not going to be as apocalyptic as many, though. I know it's easy and it feels oddly good to talk about how this is the end of the country because the Democrats won Georgia. I don't think it is. There's many other reasons why this is the end of the country. This is not one of them. I believe the center will hold in the Senate. Joe Manchin, I don't know why everyone's not talking about Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin from West Virginia, he's a Democrat, but he's really a Republican. He's not going to vote to pack the courts. He's not going to vote for a Green New Deal. He's not going to vote for D.C. statehood. He's not going to do all these crazy things. He's going to be every conservative's favorite Democrat for the next 2 years. And it's only 2 years. In 2 years, the Republicans take the House and probably the Senate back. Now, a lot can happen in 2 years, I suppose, but there is not a massive mandate with a 50-50 Senate and the smallest House minority or smallest House majority in decades and a feeble old president and the most unlikable soon-to-be president possibly conceivable. And we'll do more of this tomorrow, but if I had to choose which position to be in, obviously if I could make up my own ideal scenario, it'd be very different than this. Republicans would be in charge of everything, but out of the two options right now, I would choose to be in the Republican position 10 times out of 10. Now, maybe you're not in the mood for that type of hope and optimism right now, and Georgia should get what they voted for good and hard. Maybe the country should too. And this isn't good or ideal by any stretch, but I do not believe this is the end of the world. Much more on that tomorrow. But today is a historic day, the certifying of the electors. We got great guests coming up. But let's go over some of the most important things to know, the groundwork to know about what you're going to see today in the certification of the electors. So let's talk about how the process normally works. So December 14th, the Electoral College met in each state capital, and they chose the electors in each state. They put the electors and who they're voting for in an envelope, and they mailed it off to D.C. or horseback. I don't know how it got there. Today, normally, the vice president opens up the envelope and says, California, 55 electors go to Joe Biden. And half the people cheer and the other half boo. And they just do that. And then whoever gets above 270 is named the winner and they're the president-elect officially. Great. That's usually takes like 20 minutes, right? It's normally a very simple formality. That is not how it's going to go today. Oh, by the way, we're going to be covering this live today. It starts at 1 o'clock Eastern. I'll be anchoring that coverage today, so make sure you stay here on the first so you can get full coverage of what exactly is going to happen today. Let's go over instead right now 2 things that Trump wants to happen. All right, so we just talked about what normally happens. Now let's talk about what Trump wants to happen. There's 2 scenarios. First scenario, Pence goes rogue. So Pence takes the California electors and says, oh, yeah, those go to Biden. And then he takes the Florida electors, opens up the envelope and says, okay, they go to Trump. And then he comes across the Georgia electors and says, man, I don't like Georgia. We're not accepting these. Too much fraud. I don't accept it. And then he moves on. and he chooses on his own which electors to accept and which to not accept. And he'll choose, this is Trump's dream, he'll choose not to accept the electors from Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Pennsylvania, et cetera, keeping both candidates below 270 electors, and then it goes to the House, and the House will vote for Trump, and Trump wins. Now, there's a question, it's kind of an important one. Can Pence do that? Now, apparently, Pence doesn't think Pence can do that. But then last night, Trump said Pence does think that Pence can do that. I don't know. We'll see how he handles this in literally the next few hours here. I don't know how well Mike Pence slept last night. Now, here's the argument, the constitutional argument that both sides are making on this. So the 12th Amendment, it says that each state meets on the same day to choose their electors, right? By the way, the 12th Amendment was ratified in 1789. So these are still our founding fathers who did this. So it says you certify and then you transmit the votes to the president of the Senate, Mike Pence, The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House of Representatives, that's a joint session day, open all the certificates and the votes shall be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be the president. Now, some conservatives say that, like Louis Gohmert and others, say that this gives Pence the ability to decide if he accepts the electors from the states or not, and he can decide on his own. Surely, they say, he can't just be a glorified envelope opener. And others say, no, he's just a glorified envelope opener. He's simply presiding over this process, not ruling over the process. And they focus on the word counted, right? It says the votes shall then be counted. In the Constitution, there's another section about contested congressional elections. It's Article 1, Section 5. It says each house shall be the judge of the elections, returns, and qualifications of its own members. All right? So this happened a few times. Probably the most notable was 1984. There was a congressional seat in Indiana. There were 230,000 votes, and the Democrat won by 4. All right? But it was chaos, missing votes, found boxes of, it was total madness, right? So how do we determine the winner? The Constitution says it actually goes to the House. The Congress decides who wins that congressional race. And the Democrats in charge shockingly voted for the Democrat to, in fact, win. But the point of this is the Constitution was clear in the House that they have discretion to be the judge of the elections, the judge of the returns, and the judge of the qualifications of its own members. Our founders put that specific language in there. The 12th Amendment, they did not. They just said that the vice president shall count. They did not say the vice president shall be the judge of the count. Now, this was clarified in 1877. Why? Because there was a blizzard in Wisconsin in 1857. This is why I love history, that there could be something like a blizzard in 1857 that affects Mike Pence on January 6, 2021. So here's the quick of the story. There's the election of 1856, and the electors have to all meet on the same day in their respective state capitals, right? But there was a blizzard in Madison, and the electors couldn't meet until the next day, a day late. So a month goes by, and the envelope makes it to D.C., and the vice president gets to Wisconsin and says, the electors go to the Republican. And a Democrat stood up and said, wait a second, they filed it a day late. Those shouldn't count. And the head of the Senate said, I don't know what to do. And he did it anyway, he certified him anyway. And there were a ton of objections about this. And one senator said, hold on, the vice president does not have the power to arbitrarily decide which electors to accept and which not to accept. And one of the senators said, this arbitrary power could make a president of the United States without an election, if the vice president has that power to do whatever he wants. And that's what people want Pence to do today. Another senator at the time said it is a temptation too great for one man to have. So that's why they clarified in 1877 in a bill and said that the VP's job is merely to count. We shall see. Remember 2 nights ago, Trump, at the rally in Georgia, he said, I hope Pence does the right thing. If he doesn't, I won't like him as much. And then just this morning, Trump said states want to correct their votes, which they now know were based on irregularities and fraud, plus corrupt process, never received legislative approval. All Mike Pence has to do is send them back to the states, and we win. Do it, Mike. This is a time for extreme courage. We'll talk with one of our guests from Hillsdale College coming up here about this idea of sending it back to the states. All right, that's the first scenario. Mike Pence goes rogue. Second scenario, Pence says, Georgia, the Georgia electors go to Joe Biden. If one congressman and one senator contest it, then it, I think, immediately goes to up to 2-hour debate where each side then makes their case. After the 2 hours, they vote again, the House votes and the Senate votes. Both chambers have to have a majority vote to decide, and they both have to agree. So like in this case, both a majority of the Senate and a majority of the House would both have to say, yeah, you're right, those electors from Georgia should go to Trump. Maybe there's a chance, well, we've heard that they may contest up to 7 states, which would make it a very long day, and it would obviously go into tomorrow because it would be up to 14 hours of debate. But maybe there's a chance too that they like take all the states that are contested into 1 2-hour debate period to shorten it up, but I don't know, we'll find out. The last 3 Republicans who have won the presidency, the Democrats in the House have contested the results. But they never had a senator to join them. So it did not move forward into debate. 2004, however, they did have 1 congressman and 1 Democratic senator. It was California's Barbara Boxer, and they contested Ohio's votes for John Kerry. And it went to a debate, and John Kerry lost. So that was the one time it happened. Before that, it was 1969 with Nixon, and that was like a weird thing because there was a faithless elector, so they had a debate about that, and nothing happened from it. What makes today so unique, literally it's never happened like this, is so many congressmen. Last number I heard was 140. And so many senators, last I heard was 11, saying they're going to contest the results. That's never been the case, nor has so many states been contested. Right? So in 2004, it was just Ohio. Today, it could be 7 states being contested. So that's never happened, ever. That's why it's history today. Now, when they have the debate, I imagine Ted Cruz is going to be the guy who gets up there, right? What evidence will Ted Cruz show as he makes his challenge? How will he make his case? Will there be any new evidence? So Ted Cruz, former Solicitor General in Texas, he was going to argue the Texas case in front of the Supreme Court if the Supreme Court took the case. So he's the guy. He's the guy ready to do this. This is his grand moment. Remember Ted Cruz? I was at the convention. Ted Cruz was the guy who got up at Trump's convention and said, vote your conscience, right? And now here he is at the end of 4 years being the guy to try to save Trump's presidency. I think Trump is focusing on Mike Pence today because no way will this work. I don't care, and correct me if I'm wrong, but do you see this scenario? If Ted Cruz gets up there, gives the most astounding, moving, just brings everyone to tears, emotional, passionate, breathtaking, just unfathomable piece of rhetoric in human history. Demosthenes and Cicero they rise from the grave and give him a standing ovation. Do you think a single Democrat will vote for Donald Trump to remain president? Do you think there'll be one Democrat, let alone like the 20 or 30 or whatever it would need? There's no way. George Soros himself could fall from the rafters and say, Ted, that was stunning. I admit it, Ted, I did it. I rigged the election, and here's how I did it. Everyone, please vote for Trump. George Soros himself, and still you would have every single Democrat voting lockstep for Biden. So I don't see that one happening. So it all comes down to Pence. And I think we'll know pretty soon at 1 o'clock Eastern what Pence is going to do. But again, also, who knows? It's 2021. 2021, by the way, it's a lot like 2020, just worse. I know there's a lot of hope for the first, 5 days of January that 2021 would be like the same, but worse. So excited for today's show. More details, more analysis, more gamesmanship, more history. Our next guest is going to be a congressman who was there in 2001 with Bush v. Gore when that was contested on the House floor. So we'll learn next what's going on behind the scenes. True story. Mike Slater. We'll see you at 1 o'clock Eastern for live coverage. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, again, just getting ready for what's going to happen today in just a few hours. 1 o'clock, our special coverage starts. No idea how long it will go on. In years past, it's been like a half an hour, right? Here are the gavel in, gavel out times from previous election certification days. And today it could be like 14 hours. But we will be here covering it all for you. I want to go to Doug Osee right now. He's a businessman in Sacramento, but was a congressman for, I believe, 6 years up in Northern California. Mr. Osee, how are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you.
Thanks for being here. tell us what happened in 2001. Where were you? What did you see behind the scenes, the wheelings and dealings on the floor of the House when there was a contested election back then?
Well, I actually took the time to bring my children to the floor that day. So I was sitting there with my two daughters, and we witnessed everything. We witnessed the challenges from the Democratic side to then Governor Bush's candidacy. We witnessed the vice president sitting in the chair presiding, denying those respectfully, but denying those challenges. It took about, I want to say, maybe 90 minutes. It was, Mike, it was that. I mean, it was history. It was history live right there in front of you. So It was fascinating.
So how did that, because the vice president was Al Gore. So he said, all right, the election from the electors from Florida go to Bush, and then congressmen objected. And what did Al Gore do in response?
So the way it plays out is they take an alphabetical presentation of the states. So they start with Alabama or Alaska or whoever's first. And then they just go through. And I think Wyoming's the last one. And the slates of electors are presented, and they're walked down to the dais and presented to the clerk of the House. The vice president is standing in the chair presiding. He will call the roll, and then a member from each of the states, if they wished to object, had to get recognition from the vice president, at which point they would make they'd present their remarks, and the vice president invariably, time after time after time, said something to the effect, while the chair appreciates the sentiment of the gentleman or the gentlelady from wherever, the chair rules the objection out of order.
Wow.
And then we would go on to the next state, and that occurred 50 times plus once for the territories and Washington, D.C. And then at the end, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry. Please.
So the last one was Wyoming, and that's the one that put then Governor Bush over the top to 271. And that was it. Now, I will tell you, the chambers were packed. The tension was high. Everybody was focused and paying attention. There were multiple parliamentarians on either side of the vice president sitting in the chair presiding to make sure the thing went down properly. And that's a little known aspect of this, which I find, having sat in the chair presiding on the floor of the House, the parliamentarians are absolutely crucial to whatever happens there. I do want to leave you or share with you an anecdote from that morning, and that was that, as I told you, my daughters were with me on the floor. They were 8 and 6 at the time, so they were kind of oblivious to the seriousness of the issue. But when the proceeding was over and when the chambers were virtually empty, Vice President Gore was still down in the well of the House, conversing with people and taking well wishes and all that. So I said, girls, come on, let's go down and meet the vice president. So literally, there was nobody else in the building, so to speak. So we walk down, we wait our turn, and we're at the end of the line, and we finally get to the head of the line, and I go, Mr. Vice President, I'm Congressman O.C. We don't know each other from Boo. I wanted to bring my daughters down here and introduce them to you. And the amazing thing to me was that Vice President Gore, on the worst day of his political life, got down on one knee and talked to my daughters as if nothing else in the world was going on.
I am no fan of Al Gore politically, right? But that is a perfect story. That is a beautiful story. No, what's the lesson for you in that?
Well, the lesson I took away personally was pros will be pros. I mean, professionals will do their job. And since that moment, I have never disparaged Vice President Gore since. There's a political aspect of each personality. There's the professional aspect, and then there's the personal aspect. Al Gore did his job, and he remembered what was, that there's something larger that we are all involved in together on that moment. And I respect that.
Yeah, that is a beautiful story. Take us to the Parliamentarians. What do they do, and who are they?
Well, they're unelected. They're appointed by the House. So they serve at the pleasure of the majority of the House. At the time, the one on my left was named Brian, and the one on my right, when I would sit in the chair, was, I think, Jay. And they're out of the screenshot, so you don't see them in the screenshot when you're watching TV, but they're whispering things and slipping you notes, and you've got to be on your toes, because if you say the wrong thing, which I occasionally did when I sat in the chair presiding on the floor, if you say the wrong thing, you've got to back up immediately, correct the record, and then go forward. So the parliamentarians kind of hover outside the screenshot, whispering to whoever's presiding and slipping them notes about the precise verbiage that they have to use in responding to any inquiry or challenge or question or issue. So
they're gonna have quite a job today when we're going to talk with a professor coming up from Hillsdale and talk about the unprecedentedness of what we're going to see today in many ways. The parliamentarians are going to have to really be working on the fly to make sure today flows. Those two things being true, right? The parliamentarians and like following the Roberts Rules of Order and all that. And, the story you shared about Al Gore. What is Mike Pence thinking right now?
Well, I know Mike Pence. I served with him. He's a professional. He will do his job in accordance with the constitutional obligations that he carries. He will play it out. In my opinion, Mike Pence is going to do exactly what Al Gore did, which is he's going to respect the institutions embedded in our system and the parameters that are described in the Constitution. If there's reason to believe a slate of electors is invalid, Pence will do his job there. But if there is no reason to think or no evidence to think that this or that slate of electors is invalid, he will proceed forward. I mean, it's you got to think of Mike. You got to think of it like a rock rolling down the hill. All right, the rock can change direction, but it's still going to roll downhill. We've got to get to a completion of this. We have to come to an end, and that's what this does. This is the second to the last stop in creating a new president. So we count the Electoral College votes today, and on January 20th, we swear in a new president.
Yeah. Give us a little behind the scenes. We only got about a minute or so, unfortunately, of the gamesmanship or the partisanshipness that was happening back then versus today. Is it all very House of Cardsy, Mr. OC, or is it less romantic than maybe we think?
Well, this may shock you, but I never did watch House of Cards.
You shouldn't.
So my feedback to you is only anecdotal, but there's 10% of the membership on either side is hyper-partisan. And they end up barking at each other in a situation like this. And the remaining 80% sitting in the middle going, can we just get on with business? I mean, the die is cast. Can we just get to a completion here and get on with our business? I do want to go back to something you said earlier, Mike, and that is you're going to have a professor appear and talk about the unprecedented nature of this. This is not unprecedented. This is not unusual. The challenges on the Electoral College have been a consistent theme since at least 2000, and I'm sure that they were in previous elections too. So I don't think this is an unprecedented thing, so to speak.
Yeah, maybe only unprecedented in size of it, right? Number of congressmen, number of senators, number of states. But in kind, no. And that should be comforting for us today as we embark
I do think the outcome is set. I think at the end of the day, Joe Biden will have the electoral college votes necessary to become president on January 20th.
And we'll see how we get there very soon. Congressman Ossie, thanks for your time and thanks for that story. I will never forget it.
All right. Thank you, Mike. I'll see you soon.
Have a wonderful day. Yeah, do it again. True story. Mike Slater. I'm talking with Trent England, our electoral college expert from SaveOurStates.org, coming up next. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, want to go to our friend Trent England. He is from SaveOurStates.com, and you have to watch his documentary. It's on Amazon. If you have Amazon Prime, it's free. It's called Safeguard. So please watch that, and you will fully understand the Electoral College and what our founding fathers were thinking and why we have it, and thank goodness why we have it, and our Constitution. Trent, how are you, brother?
I'm good, Mike. Good to be here. Thank you.
So what is going to happen today? And so in the first segment, we outlined how it normally happens, and we talked about the Trump wishes, right? Pence going rogue and like by some crazy, like if Ted Cruz gives the greatest speech ever known to man, like you could convince some Democrats to vote for Trump to be president. Do you see anything out of the ordinary happening today?
I mean, obviously, some of these states are going to have objections from both the House and Senate that will wind up being debated on the House floor, the Senate floor. That's really unusual. I mean, this is something that has never really happened in a substantive way in the modern era and has almost never happened in American history, I mean, with just a couple of exceptions. So that's really unusual, but ultimately, it is a political process. The Constitution puts the power in state legislatures and then in Congress. And so it's not surprising that, it comes down to counting the votes in Congress. And at this point, it looks like there will not be enough votes to sustain any of those objections. And the process then at that point will move forward as it almost always has before.
Yeah. We've talked about the times in the past when there's been objections or whatever, but it never made it to like a whole huge debate, and certainly not many states like we're going to see today as well. What does this mean, Trent? Trump sent this out this morning. He said all Pence has to do is send them back to the states and we win. Do it, Mike. This is a time for extreme courage. What is he talking about? What does send it back to the states mean on January 6th?
To be honest, I'm not exactly sure what he's talking about there. There is no, the Constitution is fairly vague and led to some of the same kind of debates in the election of 1876, which I know you and I have talked about in the past. And, it uses the passive voice, which your English teacher will slap you on the back of the hand if you do that, right? Because it creates ambiguity. But the consensus position has always been that the vice president presides, he runs the meeting of Congress, but he doesn't have a bunch of unilateral power, right? I mean, that would, just imagine, right? Actually, you don't have to imagine. I mean, who was the guy in that chair in 2000? You probably just talked about this, right? It was Al Gore himself. He was a candidate for president, but he was also the sitting vice president. I don't think the Constitution means to give that kind of unilateral power to the vice president, and sending it back to the states. That time really has passed. Again, unfortunately, I think the states fumbled the ball on this. Yeah. But there's only so much you can do, and the Constitution creates an inauguration day. It's the one date set in the Constitution. It was moved up from March to January by constitutional amendment. And part of that is to force a deadline because we need to have a president. And, the framers of the Constitution wanted to create a political process, the power's in the hands of a bunch of politicians, and then give them a deadline and force them to come to a conclusion. And that's what's going to happen here over the next, today and then, leading up to Inauguration Day.
I know you're a scholar of this, and it's just amazing to me as an amateur. The more you learn about the Constitution, the more you learn about our founding fathers, the more brilliant these guys were, right? Like they have the vagueness where it needs to be vague. They have the clarity where it needs to be clear. They have only one date you mentioned, and it's the end date, right? That's amazing how brilliant these guys were.
Yeah, no, that's right. And, and they understood, and it's so hard for us, right? Because we are all, in some sense, contestants in this election, right? We have our views, we have people we want to win and we want to lose, and we have, very strong policy preferences. I mean, I know I sure do. I know you do, Mike. But when you're writing a constitution, right, you step back from all of that and you try to come up with a set of rules, knowing that people are going to be at odds, people are going to have, terrible ideas and good ideas, and you're going to have flawed characters in all these positions in the Senate and the House and all through the process. And, I think the founders, their brilliance was creating a system that does allow, it accepts the fact that politicians are going to be politicians and political processes are going to be political. And, what needs to happen now is for, I think, some of the members of Congress to really take the long view and force the issue of election integrity to the forefront, right? What happens today should not be sort of the end of a process of complaining about things that happen in some of these states. It should be the beginning of a process of digging into these things and figuring out what happened in a really substantive, public, transparent way, and figuring out how to solve these problems in a practical, political way that can actually happen in some of these states.
Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, so one thing that I've taken away from the last, couple months is how much power the media has to absolutely silence a story. So the media gave not a molecule of oxygen to any accusation of voter fraud in any way, which is wild because as we played on this show, the week before the election, PBS NewsHour had an 11-minute segment on how easy it is to hack in Dominion voting machines in Georgia. It was the week before the election, like setting themselves up for a Trump win so that they could claim voter fraud to the hilt. But after that, of course, nothing. Right? So is today a great chance, the last chance, the biggest chance for someone like a Ted Cruz to captivate the nation and talk about what happened, and then, as you said, make some actual real reform proposals moving forward?
Yeah, that is absolutely right. And I think that the challenge for particularly senators, because, the joke about the U.S. Senate is it's a body of 100 people who all think they should be presidents of the United States, right? The challenge is going to be, and of course the Constitution is designed to do this, that hopefully their political ambitions will also align with what's good for the country. They need to make a case to centrist Americans and even to Democrats that we can do better in elections, right? And I think, you hear all of this soaring rhetoric about democracy from the political left. Well, we need to force them to sort of put their money where their mouth is, right? If they are so dedicated to democracy, why can't we get this right and run elections in a way that's transparent enough that Americans can believe in the process? And I do think, there are going to be a lot of people watching what goes on in Congress today. I think there will be a lot of people, Mike, you mentioned how the media has shut down these stories. There will be a lot of people who aren't Trump supporters who will hear things today that they've never heard before. And I mean, that creates a powerful moment for our country if some of these leaders can really, can really rise to the occasion. And I think they will.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I like Ted Cruz. We don't need Harvard debate club Ted Cruz tonight. Let me first start by observing heretofore that it's Ted, come on. Hopefully they can lay out the case that was clearer than it's been laid out since. I love that take a lot, Trent. I think that's right. Did Tim Scott propose some voter reform stuff that I was hearing rumors of, or what have you heard that's out there? Because we have to end mail-in voting. That is for certain.
Yeah, I mean, he has in the past, and I know there are various Republican proposals out there. I will say it's a real challenge with vote by mail because some states have embraced it completely, and even some Republican states like Utah have used it. And it's I think the challenge. Well, I mean, this is where federalism comes into play, right? Every state is different. if they can figure out in Utah how to run elections by mail, I mean, I know here in Oklahoma, the way it's supposed to work is you're supposed to get it notarized and send in a photocopy of your identification. Now, they waived that rule this year because of COVID, which I think was a huge mistake. But, I do think that there are some ways to run elections by mail that are, I mean, I'm not a fan of that process. I think it's overall it's a disaster. But, there are ways to run these processes that are honest. I mean, ultimately, we ought to be doing it the way the British do it, which I never thought I would say that. But they get together, they vote in person on one day, and at the end of the night when the polls close, they turn the ballot boxes upside down, they throw the votes on the table, they count them right there in front of everybody, right? It's transparent, it's open, it's super low tech, right? They're not getting hacked because there's no machines involved. It's people, it's all out in the open. I mean, why we can't just do that is a question that maybe will be asked today on the floor of the Senate.
Yeah, the French got rid of mail-in voting in 1978. Amazing. All right, Trent, you're the man. SaveOurStates.com. And then please, everyone watch Safeguard on Amazon Prime. And you can get it on the website too, SaveOurStates.com. Thanks, Trent. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Mike.
We'll do it again. Just on, his keyword there was supposed to. You're supposed to do this. There was a lot of supposed tos in this previous election. And I hate it because even when you have like Wisconsin, where very strict voter ID laws, there's a one little exemption there for indefinitely confined, right? And the left will find it and then make the most of it, to say the least. All right, coming up next, we'll talk with a Hillsdale College professor and then constitutional historian. And then we'll, at 1 o'clock today, we're going to go live to see what happens. We'll carry it all right here on the First. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, let's dive into the constitutional history of what we are going to see today. By the way, we got our live coverage today at 1 o'clock Eastern. I will be anchoring it, so don't miss a minute of what is going to come. Paul Moreno is here. He is a constitutional history professor at the great Hillsdale College. Professor Moreno, how are you, sir?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
Good to talk to you. So let's start with the 12th Amendment. So we did a brief run through of the 12th Amendment to kick off the show, but help us understand what we need to know about the 12th Amendment today.
Yeah, the text is very spare. It comes down to pretty much one sentence saying that the presiding officer of the Senate, that's Vice President Pence, will count the ballots. It doesn't say anything about if there's a dispute or an objection about the ballots that are submitted. And apart from 1876, when Congress set up a special commission to decide conflicting electors who had been sent to Congress, we really don't have any precedent about this. I'd heard that there was somebody who objected in 2016 or 2017 when they were counting the last electoral votes, but that again nothing came of it. So we're in uncharted waters here, and just like with the presidential impeachment. This Congress is pretty much going to make up the rules as it goes along by majority rule, and in that case, the Democrats controlling the House, and not nearly enough Republicans are willing to go along with this.
We showed the text of the 12th, and it says, the votes shall be counted. Do you see any wiggle room in there, as some are hoping there is, that gives Pence anything beyond glorified letter opener?
Right. No, I mean, there's certainly anything is possible. Again, within the text of the Constitution, it allows for Congress being the final judge of this to overturn what the electoral vote count has been. But it would take something like a miracle to bring that about. But procedurally, there's nothing in the Constitution to stop it.
So we kicked off the show talking about the two dreams that Trump has today. And one of them is the one you sort of alluded to where someone contested and then it goes to 2 hours of debate. But as you said, because the Democrats control the majority, nothing's going to come from that. But the first thing is the Pence going rogue. And then, and as we kind of talked about how that seems unlikely, but Trump sent out this tweet this morning. He said, all Mike Pence has to do is send them back to the states and we win. Do it, Mike. This is time for extreme courage. What does he mean, send it back to the states, you think?
Yeah, that's a new one to me. I mean, certainly the states were the place where this should have taken place. If there were shenanigans in the actual voting, as in my own state of Michigan, and I'm pretty sure there was, it was up to the state legislatures to take that on. And in states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, where you had Republican legislatures, notwithstanding Democratic governors, the text of the Constitution is very clear there, too, where the electors are chosen in such a way as the state legislatures shall determine. That would have been the time to take a stand. And there was a brief moment where some of the county canvassers in Michigan recognized what was going on, but they buckled. And so I think that the time for that has also passed.
Yeah, I was thinking that ship sailed back before December 14th when the electors met in the first place. So I wonder what the president means. Like, I remember I read something in passing about like Pence can delay or something. He can delay it, and the legislatures can. I don't know, but you don't see anything.
Yeah, again, here as the presiding officer of the Senate, just as in an impeachment case where it says the president's impeached and the chief justice presides over the Senate as a court. But we know there that the majority of the Senate can overrule any procedural judgments that the Chief Justice makes. Likewise, Pence is only the presiding officer of the Senate, and he can only do what a majority of the Senate allows him to do. And I think there are probably more than a majority of the Senate, even though it's still a Republican Senate, that would overrule him if he tried to really go rogue.
It will go to debate. Right? Like they're going to have one congressman and one senator object, and we're going to go to up to 2 hours of debate. What do you see happening there? What do you think that's going to look like?
Well, I assume they're going to follow what are the current rules of the Senate, where to cut off debate, you need 60 votes. At least, for the time being, the Democrats have said when they take control of the Congress, that's up for grabs. But I would assume that there would be more than enough Republicans who would go along with Democrats to cut that off and move along.
So do they literally so it's a joint session and they vote they object to whatever. And then do they go to their own separate chambers and have their own, at the same time, debate going on?
Yeah, I think, again, we've never been through this before, and this is all, I think, covered by the Electoral Count Vote Act of 1877, which was, again, after the last seriously disputed election, Congress tried to provide some rules for managing this system. And some experts have said that act itself is unconstitutional. Some people said that the Electoral Commission that settled the dispute in 1877 was also unconstitutional. So, again, like an impeachment or rare occasions, especially in conflicts having to do with foreign policy, the Constitution really doesn't provide any detailed instructions about this, and we're making it up as we go along. And that pretty much means majority rule in both houses of Congress.
Would you argue, as a constitutional history professor, that lack of perhaps clarity is a feature or a bug of the Constitution?
No, I think it's a feature. I think the founders said at a certain point, the Americans 200 years from now are going to have to learn to get along by themselves. They're going to have to be grown up. We can't provide for every contingency. Both Lincoln and John Marshall said it wouldn't be a constitution if it contained that level of detail for every contingency. So we've got to govern ourselves, and this is one of those occasions.
We just talked with an expert of the Electoral College process, and he obviously finds our founding fathers, holds them in great esteem. Do you as well? And maybe you can take this opportunity to talk about the wisdom
Absolutely.
of our founders.
And people have pointed out that whatever irregularities there were in this election, and I'm certain there were, I think it affected the outcome of the election. But we've had those in the past. And one of the benefits of the Electoral College, as others have pointed out, is that instead of having one system that you can corrupt, you have 50 systems, or 51 if you want to include the District of Columbia, and that decentralizes it and makes the system less liable to manipulation. So I think the benefits of the Electoral College now are more apparent than ever. So the other great thing about it is there's no getting rid of it. Most states have an advantage in terms of their influence in choosing the president and would never vote to amend the Constitution to get rid of it. That's why one of the interesting things in the next Congress is going to be if they go for this national popular vote compact, where states with a majority of the electoral votes agree to give their electoral votes to whoever wins the national popular vote. They've tried that already. They don't have enough states, and you can't do it without the approval of Congress, but now Congress may give that approval. So there are plans to get around the Electoral College. They've been around for a while.
You say that some states, well, you say even most states would not want to do that? You believe?
Yeah, if you look at the population, because of the weight that's given to the less populous states, because they get a number of electors that's equal to their senators plus their congressmen, about 2/3 of the states have more influence in choosing the president than they would in a simple, if it was just by population alone. And since you need 3/4 of the states to ratify a constitutional amendment, that's probably not going to happen.
What did our founding fathers in this day after the Georgia election, so it looks like maybe a 50-50 Senate, what did our founding fathers feel about gridlock?
Again, not anticipating the party system that we have, fierce party competition, and it couldn't be closer than we have it today. The idea was that, probably for the most important thing is they expected the federal government to do a lot less than it does today. So having a federal government that was, efficient and got things done was fine, because they didn't expect it to do all that much. They expected it to defend the country, to provide a sort of a national common market, and maybe deliver the mail. So that gridlock today has become kind of some people say the next best thing to a constitution, in that it limits government. But now we have, again, a rare occasion. It looks like the Georgia results are that one party is going to be in control of all three presidency in both houses of Congress, although not by much. We are, I guess, relying on Joe Manchin to keep his word that he won't vote to end the filibuster. But Schumer says that nothing's off the table, and there could be some genuinely revolutionary results from one-party control right now. And what their goal is one-party control forever, that you turn the United States into a one-party state.
How would they do that, or what would that look like?
That means packing the Senate. Never mind the Supreme Court. I think you can rely on the Supreme Court to behave itself and to follow the election returns, as they say. But adding the District of Columbia as a state, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, maybe cut California into a couple of states. There's all kinds of ways in which you can entrench one party. The mail-in voting that we had, that I think accounts for most of the questionable results of this election, make that a permanent thing. Let alone immigration policy, altering the population in a way that benefits one party.
Packing the Senate. Jeez. Paul Moreno, constitutional history professor at Hillsdale College. Thanks for your insights, sir. We'll talk again.
Very thanks for having me on the show. Thanks much.
Thank you. Thanks for taking time. So today, we're done for now. We're going to come back at 1 o'clock Eastern, and we'll see. Again, nothing like this has ever happened. Not even close to this extent, where you have this many congressmen, this many senators contesting the results of this many states. And what will Mike Pence do? We'll find out coming up in just a few hours. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. See you at 1.